Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 86 of Podcast of Five Rings, your source of enlightenment in the realm of video games, tabletop, anime, film, and tech. Each episode of Podcast of Five Rings releases Monday mornings on iTunes and SoundCloud, and topic by topic, day by day on YouTube, with the full video releasing on Friday. To catch updates about the podcast or for other news, give us a follow on your social media platform of choice. List in the description below. I'm your host, GM, and overseer of Podcast of Five Rings, Obsidian, joined tonight by the resident wildcard Mao.
Yo.
And the Dark Fortune Duelist Meta.
Yo.
And Tets is out of town. He's with us in spirit. He vows to be back next week. So he can hear the Final Fantasy XIV discussion.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, we've 4th of July obviously was on the last Thursday when we would normally record, and then we had the week off for that. So we've been off a while. What you guys been doing?
Didn't give me time to recharge.
I'm glad I had an extended time off work. A nice little half-week mini vacation, 4 days off to just completely be absorbed in Final Fantasy. That's basic. Yeah. We had a cookout, and then I just played Final Fantasy the entire time almost.
I actually had the whole week off because I took off for Shadowbringers release.
Oh, wow.
I had the whole week off. But funny story on that. So our company did the 4th of July being off and whatnot, and they did an early release for people on Wednesday on the day before. So today, my supervisor actually came back because they took a different time period of off, and they were messaging me, and they're like, and we were talking and said, hey, by the way, did you know that they had every one of our sites closed down on the 5th? And I'm like, wait, what? And they said only the HQ building was open. Every other site, like our other guys, got to other locations for their normal jobs, and they were actually told no, the building shut down. I'm like,
because
I don't know. We literally don't know. They ended up sending out an email and whatnot, and to them, but we were just talking about. I'm like, I can't understand why they would close down every production facility, but they wouldn't. They wouldn't close down the HQ itself. It was really weird. So, but we talked about it for a little bit, and I said, okay, well, whatever. I mean, if that's what they wanted to do. So.
Yeah, our store was closed too, so.
I was just really surprised because they didn't announce it to anybody.
Just people showed up to work and couldn't get
That's
in.
what happened. People showed up on site and they had to be turned away.
Weird.
Get out of here.
I know.
That would have sucked for you because you commute a long way.
Oh yeah, I have to commute a long way. I mean, I was glad I had the day off naturally.
Yeah,
now I'm kind of wondering. Now I'm kind of wondering, can I get that day back?
Yeah,
please.
So I gotta talk with HR about that. I was like, that's a really weird thing to just tell people that they go home.
Mm-hmm.
The site's closed.
What about you, man?
How was your 5th?
I don't know. I had to work. Work's sucked lately.
Yeah, it does that.
Yep,
it's also been extremely
overtime.
hot. How's the weather been down there? Because it's been heat wave city up here. The index has been
hot,
like 106 every day.
It's been hot, but I don't think hotter than usual. Like probably around 100, but it's
just normal for.
It's been pretty rainy too some days actually. Which I assume. I try not to go outside whenever possible in the summer, so I mostly go AC to AC is my general goal. So
see, that's what's so nice about going to Gen Con for me. I say this every year. I think it's just there's no humidity in Indiana. It's amazing.
That's true. Indiana honestly has no humidity. You get heat for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's hot, but
it's never humid.
I'm not immediately soaked in sweat when I step outside.
Step outside and you're immediately sweating a waterfall right on your brow.
Right now, our humidity is 69. Nice.
So, does anything actually live down there, or is it?
That's
the dreaded Florida man does.
That's kind of low.
No,
65% is low.
Probably, yeah. I don't know.
Is that average? I think we're talking with Tets. He did state that 40% is your guy's low. If it's 40% humidity, it's kind of low out there.
When there have been times where I've traveled to places with lower humidity, and my nose will start to bleed because it gets so dry.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
because it's
here
just
I am,
humid
I'm s-
all year long.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, and 40% humidity to the most of the world generally means you would start suffocating on your own breath. It's-
You get to deal with them and the love bugs.
Yeah,
The
it's
dreaded
only
love
real
bugs.
bad when you go over like a lake or something.
oh God.
Then you just
That's
have a
probably the worst
black
part.
front of the car.
Yeah.
Like, dang it. I got a whole nest of creatures in my front grill.
Where man? We geez, probably a decade ago or whatever. We went there's for work. We had this testing site, and the containers that we would leave there, like when we would during the summer months, like it would just be a wall of black lady love bugs. Like it was
Ooh.
it just would be like a shifting wall of black.
Yeah.
Like,
That
on these, like,
is-
pan containers.
That is eerie. That like to
Yeah.
walk around a corner and just see that. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm gonna come back a different day.
Yeah.
I've seen enough horror movies to know how this is gonna end for me if I approach that container.
Yeah, that's what happened to me a few weeks ago. I was at my buddy's painting some of my minis with him, and I went outside to prom stuff. He has a bucket out there, and I moved his water hose, and there was just a swarm of, I don't know what insect they were. They were red and black.
Oh,
They looked like little beetles of some kind, just literally like thousands of them on his water
Was
hose.
it a ladybug?
It wasn't ladybugs. They weren't spotted.
oh,
Unless
okay.
there's a version that isn't spotted. I could be
No.
wrong. I'm not
If it
a
wasn't spotted, then I have no
insectologist, and I know there's an actual word for that. I don't know it. But yeah, so on his bucket, when I touched it, the hose, I moved it. Literally like swarms of them. There's like a hole in his roommate's house that they were all coming out of and stuff, and I was like, well, this is horrifying.
yeah, I was gonna be like, no, you know what?
They're just going to
Another day,
smother
maybe.
me. I just sprayed them with primer to get them away, and they started running.
That's yeah, I'd be like, no, you know, different day. I think I'm done.
Yeah, I don't mess around with insects, particularly those that fly and sting,
Wow.
because I'm allergic.
You telling me that you don't like hornets, wasps?
No.
bees?
It's, his bloodline is weak and inferior.
Yeah.
Can't handle the sting.
No, I can't. My arm swells up like a grapefruit.
Oh man, Jesus.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like
Die?
serious bad or anything. It could be worse. I'm just like abnormally allergic to it. Like I'll have a
Okay.
much
But
worse
it's-
reaction than's typical.
I see.
It's not a fatal reaction, but it's
No,
definitely not a
it's
reaction.
not a comfortable one.
Yeah. You sure? You're trying to tell me that swelling of the sides of a melon fruit is not an ideal situation?
No, it's not. Well, on that note, let's get into topics. And I think you got an ideal something you want to explain, Meta.
Yeah, I do have an ideal something, and that ideal something is something I'm not going to explain. Let's talk about it. No, actually,
Here it is. Next topic.
here it is. Next topic. On to the next person. Don't talk about my topic anymore, ever again. Actually, no. What I wanted to kind of talk about is the other day I was watching a review done by, because with Shadowbringers having been out, talk about World of Warcraft and Battle for Azeroth has been going on. They just recently really dropped down their newest
Yeah, 8.2.
video. Yeah, like they had a new cutscene and whatnot. The big bad guy, if you haven't seen it, well, spoiler alert. The big bad guy does escape. It looks like somehow
No.
player characters. Yeah, right. It's a
It wasn't
surprise.
Ashara, it was Nazoth the whole time.
The whole time. Old man is off.
Yeah. The old gods.
You got away with
You
two,
just
but
keep
one for you
killing them,
pesky
they keep
yours-
coming back.
I would have gotten away with two, but one for you pesky Azerothians and
Yep.
your what? And your
Thanks for the
mates,
necklace,
too.
bro. Bye. It's basically
So-
8.2 in a nutshell.
Yeah, pretty much. So they've dropped that information down and whatnot. People have been talking about it. There's been kind of the joking with World of Warcraft and Blizzard posting out like 3 free days. Like they've done it twice now with Shadowbringers having dropped, and people have been kind of making fun of it for a little bit. Like they're desperately trying to get back the player base. And so
I think Final Fantasy has more subscribers than WoW does right now.
it does. It actually does. They, at the end of Stormblood, mind you, prior to Shadowbringers actually dropping, at the end of Stormblood, they had just passed over 1 million active subscribers. They had 1 million active people playing the game within the last month census. And I am certain that number is only going to increase since Shadowbringers dropped. But more importantly, with the talk of World of Warcraft and whatnot, and the disappointment I've seen with a lot of people within its storytelling and the stuff I've seen, it kind of got me thinking about where that failure might have been. And I kind of think, I don't know if I dawned on like, "Oh, I figured it out" kind of thing, but I do think one of the biggest problems I've seen with World of Warcraft, and is actually a similar shape with Legends of the Five Rings, in almost a sense, because at the end of Legends of the Five Rings lifespan, it was actually dwindling in player numbers. There were definitely talks of trying to figure a way to get more people.
Reboot, in quotes.
Yeah, in a way, almost, yes. And that's kind of what they were doing with the end of the storyline.
And that's the talk in WoW, too, that there's a potential reboot, like a soft reboot coming.
Yeah, it's definitely been there. And I think both of these guys, their biggest issues kind of come from that lightning in a jar that they captured on their initial release for what it was, and the love for it, and how it could only kind of really only go upwards from there. If you watch a prolific YouTuber, his name is I forgot. Oh no, I'm gonna go blank on it.
He's prolific.
He's prolific. He's a YouTuber. What's his name? Oh, give me a second here. I can grab his name. Let's see here.
Stretching for time. Stretching for time.
Just making things up.
Here we are,
Matthew
stretching for
Koval. There we go.
Oh yeah, Koval.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Matthew Koval. Yes, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, he talks about D&D a lot.
Yeah, a
He
lot
does
of
talk about
D&D.
D&D. He talks about many different elements and whatnot. But one of his videos, he actually talks about the greatest story in gaming.
Yeah, it's my favorite video.
L5R,
It is
right?
L5R, absolutely. And in this story, he talks about both the love of people had for it, the amazing idea that the story is living, and as you play the game, the storyline will change, and then if players do something, it affects the storyline, which earnestly is one of the best parts about L5R. But jumping back here real fast, they both suffer what I think is from the syndrome that I'm just going to name, because I don't know if there's actually like a term for it out there or not, but from the war that cannot end.
Mm-hmm.
Both World of Warcraft, and if you've played the games before, Warcraft, which had World of Warcraft obviously had the love and ability for Warcraft prior to it kind of giving it the love that World of Warcraft got from people jumping over from the Warcraft series into World of Warcraft itself. But L5R kind of had to start just blank and whatnot and really sell itself on its own initial premise. But they both are quite literally starting off about two factions opposing one another and kind of at war with one another. Warcraft, in the sense of World of Warcraft and the Warcraft series in general, was first, just orcs versus humans. And then it kind of expanded into a storyline with 2, with a little bit more into it. And then by the time you get to Warcraft 3, they've truly kind of fleshed out and a really good storyline and stuff for it, delving into both Illidan and Arthas, and the Lich King, and so on and so forth, and really building a lot of lore and backstory. But at the base bone, it's always kind of been about these two factions clashing with one another. And L5R, when its initial release, kind of took that to 7 in the beginning, where 7 factions are kind of colliding with each other, with a couple of minor clans and families,
and the Shadowlands and all.
And the Shadowlands, which were its own beast, technically making like 8 factions, quote unquote. And they've jumped in and out of different factions. They've had like Toturi's army, they've had the Naga, so on and so forth.
The Brotherhood of Shinsu.
The Brotherhood.
Was a playable There's a lot of playable factions.
There's a lot of factions.
The beginning of the game.
But they were there, and they really both had that kind of magic. They had this wonderful idea, these two factions colliding with one another, and they were kind of in that uncharted territory in their own ways. For L5R, it was multiple factions with decks of clans, much like Magic the Gathering, with a theme around that clan, but having multiple styles of win victories and different clans focusing on those different styles of victories, giving it a wonderful, breathtaking idea mixed with the ever-evolving storyline affected by players. And in World of Warcraft itself, it had a vibrant, very large set of mythology and lore to it to build its based upon, with the initial game not really focusing on anything more than these two factions fighting, and here's some endgame content to play through, and that deals with undead and stuff. And that's kind of really what it was all about. But if you'd played during Vanilla Warcraft, you'd be very well aware of the fact that that was probably when faction fighting between players of themselves was larger than ever, partly because the only way to PvP before they implemented Battlegrounds was to go to somebody else's house and burn it down until they sent more guys over to stop you from burning it down and to take their house back.
There's a raid on Goldshire. There's a raid on the Crossroads.
Absolutely. There were raids everywhere. It was a very common thing, but it almost kind of helped breed that idea of no, we're definitely at war with them. We're fighting them because look at us. They're fucking up our quest givers. We can't have players leveling up. We're getting ganked in Stranglethorn Valley. I need to call my level.
I need to call my hunter. All these rogues are here and he's got flash bombs.
Exactly. You need to call them over. I mean, you've definitely got stories and legends and players of their own lore and myth that you can look up that are real people who have done some really crazy things over the game and the like. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it was very alive and vibrant. But that seems to be where these games always come back to. The problem is ultimately at the end of the day, and this is where the crux of the issue I think is that it can't be that way. They keep creating storylines where eventually some clan or the factions themselves go at war with each other, but because they can't truly commit to the death or the victory of one clan in an absolute manner, they always need to introduce a third party. In regards to World of Warcraft, you have the at least beyond vanilla, because vanilla truly was kind of like its own beast coming off of EverQuest.
Yeah, there was no big bad of vanilla.
There really wasn't. You just had the kind of the end game raids, which were very hard to get to. So there was that. But then you had in Burning Crusade, you had obviously Illidan, and then in Wrath of the Lich King, you had Arthas. But ultimately, it would always come back to is like, oh no, we kind of need to bring back the factions, but the wars between the factions of Alliance and Horde, and in
the whole
Cataclysm,
BFA.
After Wrath of the Lich King, they really tried to even during Wrath of the Lich King, they tried to preserve that mentality of nothing else. And then during Cataclysm, they kind of wanted to create that mentality. I remember it being a very big goal that they wanted to push forward of reigniting that kind of fighting between the two clans and whatnot. And Mists of Pandaria kind of wanted to continue on, but really maintain again, like Wrath of the Lich King. And then you had the Legion, which truth be told, I didn't really pay much attention to. And now Battle for Azeroth is like reigniting it quite literally through its own storyline of it and whatnot. But the problem is that it's been faltering. It's been failing for years, and it's only gotten worse, not only just because of mechanical items and whatnot, but the storylines themselves are very lackluster. This war feels very weird. We've just had, for World of Warcraft, you just had Garrosh, who was already corrupted and trying to cause conflict and fights and whatnot, and now you have Sylvanas burning down trees.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's Garrosh Part 2.
Yeah, and that's really what a lot of people say. It just feels like the same thing, and they're almost expecting to be like, oh, she's corrupted, or oh, she's actually doing it to do something good, or oh, somebody gave really bad advice. We're seeing the storyline kind of pan out now. Legend of the Five Rings kind of has the same issue, but in a different way. Yeah. It's constantly where we have the Day of Thunder, probably one of the most magnificent, not only because it focuses almost solely on the clan wars, Sengoku Jidai, but you have all these clans fighting each other. You have the emperor who's died off, and you have two warring factions who both have potentially rights to the throne, with a third evil party intermingling. And at the end of it all, it turns out that, truth be told, it was manipulating from the shadows. They come forth, 7 heroes, go on out, beat the villain at a bittersweet victory, but ultimately the empire survives and the story can continue. Again.
For the same thing that happened, basically. With
and again. And again. And that keeps happening. And it's a problem.
Yeah, I believe Coville says in that video that they were going to end it after the Day of Thunder and just not ever doing it. But the game was so popular back then that, like, they literally had to.
They had to continue it on. But the problem was that story should have ended. We've had... If you look through the history of LFR and you look at the number of characters that they've done, and they've done some small time skips here and there, but it's never really enough to justify the amount of fights in the wars.
It's like a generation, maybe. At best, typically.
it's really ridiculous about how often they get into fights and wars with one another, and there always seem to
After
have
1,000 years of peace.
just enough men to always send off to war about 5 years later. So it's just like, man, they are really pushing out those children to raise them up to die in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, where are they pulling their ranks from and whatnot? How many people are actually dying in these fights? Because from a storyline standpoint, it sounds like a lot, but then not so much actually. I mean, we just had, what was the Destroyer War at the end of the AEG? The Destroyer War was like what, 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago before, we were starting on like the next quote unquote Day of Thunder, so to speak. I mean, this wasn't really long ago. It's not much time. I could be wrong. I didn't look at the numbers.
It was like 15, I think, maybe.
Yeah,
Something.
so it's enough for like, let's get enough for like a generation and a half. So that's not too bad. But ultimately, the problem is that it ends up being the same story, and that's really the more important key part here is that the factions can't change. You can't kill off the Lion Clan. If we did that, we'll lose all of our Lion Clan players.
Well, the end of one of the mega games, I think it was the Race for the Throne, where the spider, it was like, whoever gets last place in the mega game, which, mega game, for those who don't know, AG always had like a game outside of the card game that would be kind of like the big story prize for the block of the game. So, and this was Samurai Edition, I believe. I could be wrong. It was all about the Race for the Throne. Dottori Naseru had wandered off on his quest for enlightenment and got killed in the Shadowlands, because of course he did. So which clan is going to be the emperor? The whole mega game, there's multiple things like cosplay contests, RPG events, like food drives. You would get points as a clan, and whoever had the most points would get to choose a character who would become the emperor. The Dragon Clan won, and that's how we got Oweko. But the clan that lost was supposed to get dissolved, basically, and like everybody becomes a Ronin. The spider got last, and I believe they knew they were going to be important for the story later, so they just kind of hand waved that down the road. They're like, well, they're already kind of not a clan anyways, but they were eligible, so it makes sense. Yeah, which is such a cop out, by the way.
So that's really unfortunate to hear.
Yeah, it comes down to, it's really like it's these games that, like, when you have
evergreen games, basically, they don't end.
Yeah, they don't want to progress the story too much, because you can't have anything widely changed, because you can't lose a faction, because that would, upset a large portion, or maybe is just tied to the game in general. Like you can't lose the Horde for war.
What? Like, there's speculation, Mal. I'll talk about in a second. Finish your point.
Well, maybe you can, but for a long time, like a character, when you start up World of Warcraft and want to play through the old stuff, like you can't mechanically get rid of all that.
No.
Yeah.
Like, and because you basically would have to start a new game, which, I mean, that would be like the whole reboot talk. Because you can still go through all the old expansions in WoW, right? So
pretty much
that would change that. Like, just wouldn't work. There's Warcraft, or at least 40K was a big blah 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 words.
It happens to the best of
person
us.
Who I don't know. They were real bad about this for the longest time, to the point where, like, I've dropped out, and I understand now that they are like progressing the story a bit, but like you can never do anything so drastic to like wipe out half the factions or whatever, because then like suddenly they lose their $1,000 army, right? Like, they can never take that risk.
Absolutely not.
And then like Magic, when they started doing their story, it was about war and stuff, but their mechanics are tied to the colors. They're never going to get rid of an entire color. But
they don't need to. That's the beauty of Magic, actually. I wanted to point that out real fast. Magic's beauty and almost saving grace is that it's not actually tied to like some specific faction or not. It's specifically tied to a style, a thought, or a mentality, a way of magic in and of itself.
Right, which they play around with. But it's just the color wheel is probably one of the greatest creations in gaming.
I would say absolutely yes. It allows them to perform storylines and whatnot.
Like the original story is about the Brothers' War. Like when they finally started getting into the story stuff, which I think was like 94. Yeah, Urza, which then led into Phyrexians and Yawgmoth and stuff. And they've had these big epic storylines and these villains that they can permanently kill. Yawgmoth's dead, and I don't think he's ever coming back.
Which Bolus is gone now.
Yeah, well, lately
away.
They have been kind of like reserved about killing their villains, but they can tuck them away for like 10 years. And like you get new, well, part of it is because of the way Magic is set up is you can hop from world to world. That also allows them to do way more variety.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The different planes and stuff really help the story stay fresh.
It's honestly when they came up with Magic, it's probably one of the most brilliant strokes. They not only did not tie themselves too hard to anything, but allow themselves to still keep something that's familiar for your players while experimenting with new items. And yet at the same time, they're always able to try something new, to create a new story, to make new heroes, and to set
It's
up.
cool. It's like a fast food item too. It's like the plane goes away, then you eventually have the promise of coming back to it one day. And people love their planes. I want my Szechuan sauce back, and I want my chili cheese burrito Taco Bell.
They even had like sort of a soft reboot for the storyline, like when I started playing, so like a little over a decade ago. But none of the mechanics had to change because it was only a story decision. And like separating them enough, like separating the mechanics and the story enough, let them do that. Like, otherwise you have to like reboot the entire game, which is
the other what I was going to say earlier, going back to WoW, kind of like one of the big kind of I think problems with the story and the trope they do, and it kind of ties in with the whole endless war motif, like thing they just keep going back, that the game seems to have a problem because it's World of Warcraft. There's always a war. They even acknowledge it in the latest patch. There's like the cutscene with Jaina and Thrall, because Thrall comes back, and they're like, every time we like band together and then we just dissolve back to fight, like the Horde Alliance come together to defeat a big bad, then they just like go right back to fighting. Like they're kind of, I think, trying to get away from that finally. Cause like the Horde right now has the whole story with the Horde is that you're either loyal to Sylvanas or loyal to Thrall, basically, and Thrall and them are allying with Stormwind, and because Sylvanas tried to basically kill the leader of the Tauren and all this stuff, or did she? Like, because she's I suspect she's gonna have the Dindu thing where she's like actually has like, if I did it all for the good of Azeroth, it was my secret super plan that I couldn't tell anybody. Thing, which is it's another trope that kind of gets old sometimes too, but I don't, these stories can only tell. This is kind of like the point. These stories that don't stop and keep building on each other and stay in the same world, kind of, they probably can only tell so many stories.
Like
and then
the other option is to make things feel fresh is to
time skip.
Yeah, they could. Every expansion could be a larger time skip, right?
Yeah.
To where you don't have the same characters showing up all the time to make it like going to war every few years like is unreasonable for these same characters.
And I think AG figured that out at the end, what they were going to do.
Yeah, they were really. They were going
to skip like 3 generations, I think.
They were going to do a lot because we actually we had the pleasure. I don't know, was it ever released to public or was it just
the Onyx stuff?
The last story had like I think it had Saken's like granddaughter was like the leader of the refugees.
Yeah, it was colonies. Like his granddaughter.
Yeah, they revealed some of it. Like there's the stuff with the Mantis. They revealed there was a story or whatever from like the Mantis was no longer a clan, but it was like from their perspective or something.
It was. I think that was ultimately what needed to happen, though. We needed to see a change. We needed.
Which they ended up doing by the other option is making an entire new game.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they ended up selling it out and never got to
Yeah.
pass, which was in itself disappointing. But
Yeah, it was going to be cool, and everyone who play tested said the new edition was like really good too. So
yeah, it's really unfortunate. But that's kind of like, unfortunately, these are the beasts that they've kind of made of themselves. Sticking to a storyline that constantly repeats the same beats, it causes a very slow, almost sorrowful degradation of quality within the storyline in of itself. Things have to change. That's just a mandatory point when you make a storyline. The reason why Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder are oftentimes never really changing is that while they have definitely their own worlds and whatnot, and that they can do stuff in them, a lot of their stuff is created being very world neutral, so to speak. So you can just plop it in any world that you want to make up off on the bat, and you're done. You can make your own world, and you're good to go. And you can just plop these. There are more assets than they actually are tied to the world itself. Which kind of helps again, and much like how Magic is about the color wheel and whatnot. It allows it to, and it's because it's always hopping worlds. Kind of allows it to just be very loose with things. It's more of an asset than it actually is an actual thing tied very, very strictly to the world that it's a part of. D&D and Pathfinder are able to kind of do the same thing because they're just something you plop down in a world that you can make.
Yeah, it's a role set, not a setting.
Magic was recently they were trying to shake up their story stuff with following the same group of people for an extended period of time, and they found it wasn't quite working. So
yeah,
they are going away from that a bit more now. Like supposedly the next, they made the Gatewatch, and I mean it lasted for about 5 years. And then they disbanded the Gatewatch and we're gonna try some new things again, which they can do.
Yeah,
and back to Theros. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate, but I'm hoping to see that if World of Warcraft doesn't take this in a route that doesn't go kind of unfortunately the way that L5R has, and not to bash on Fantasy Flight Games because they are doing effectively a reboot following a lot of normal beats though, and people did love this specific period of time. So
yeah,
take that for what it is.
I think currently their biggest problem is they're not releasing enough story quick enough. I think.
No, it's been like what? I think they've had the game for almost 2 years now.
Yep, 2 years.
Maybe, yeah. It's been 2 years, and
since it released, I think they've owned it for like three or four.
It is barely moved in 2 years' time.
Yeah, they've. I don't know. I know they had some issues, like their arc era or whatever they're called, got delayed, which I know set them back. But man, it felt like just trying to keep up with the story. It's like there
was like a giant 5 of them came out within like a month, and then
the last big story moment
was
happened.
The Emperor dying, I believe.
Right, that was like 9 months ago or something.
Yeah, hold on. I can
something like that.
Let me pull it up here real fast.
And the stories we've gotten from then have not advanced that.
Let's see here.
Yeah, which the next giant, basically like the next rotation is supposed to do, but like you said, it was delayed and all that stuff. So I don't know, but like the stories have been solid, like they're well written and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some really cool stories, but
some nice turns.
Way too slow.
I'm trying to find actually.
How am I supposed to get invested when I get a story randomly every few months?
The last short story was released at 4/24 of this year.
Right, and that one didn't even advance. It was like a prequel, or not that one, but the last
ancillary story.
Yeah, I think the last major one was actually farther back because then before that was The Last Stone Played, which was
the prequel, or that was the one that was set before the Emperor died, about the Emperor.
Yeah.
So it's just been forever since they dropped the big story moment and then haven't progressed it at all.
Yeah, and that happened with the AG sometimes too. It's probably just kind of the nature of the beast there.
I'm guessing so, but I would like to see World of Warcraft take a story in a different route. I would like it to finally change, to progress, to become what it must.
For a long time, they were just doing what made them money, right? They're this is working. Why should we change it? But
exactly.
They weren't. They got too settled in on that formula. They weren't able to quickly, see that it wasn't working anymore and change it for the better. Like, maybe there should have been a new, like a World of Warcraft 2 or whatever you want to call it. Like, maybe they should have done that a few years ago.
Basically, kind of did. They just didn't call it that.
Like, actually, like,
yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I mean, they could do that because a lot of people suspect that they're either going to break up into 3 or 4 factions or mix some of the races around, like Taurens and Orcs. Like, the Alliance and the Horde as we know them will dissolve and become basically like some kind of new affiliation. Because the Night Elves are kind of like lost their shit, for lack of a better term. The Worgen are kind of like on their side because they're all about the moon and stuff like the Night Elves.
It's possible we might see them faction change out. I'm hoping for the L5R side of things. I'm really hoping that at the end of the storyline, it takes a very different road.
Yeah,
and
I would like to see a time jump after whatever they're doing right now.
Yeah, I would love to see definitely change.
I don't want them to just hop to the Shadow Dragon, or not Shadow,
the
Living Light Darkness afterwards.
I feel ultimately any storyline that I feel like if you're writing a storyline, you have to be okay with change. You have to be very, very okay with the fact that you cannot keep repeating those same beats. If you do it, your game is going to stagnate from a very much a storyline wise.
But they also they can't ever get rid of a clan because I think their core will always be legal. So like that's already a built-in sort of like this.
Well, that's unfortunately
how they might do
created.
It. They could just say you can't play this in a tournament anymore.
Maybe.
Yeah, they could say that, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's the rules are up to them. They can decide what they want to do with their IP at the end of the day.
I know AEG did get rid of the Scorpion for a time, but they came back.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were banished.
Yeah. That's not a bad thing to do. Being banished and having them eventually come back is fine. It changes up the storyline. Just ultimately, if you're going to have factions fight each other, I feel like maybe after a bit of time, you need to commit to what faction might actually go the way of the dodo. And if not go the way of the dodo, at least be okay with the fact taking a very potential drastic change in its design or the way they work. Because I would have
loved to see like an L5R story where just one of the clans basically gets conquered, kind of like what actually happened in feudal.
I mean,
and assimilated essentially. Like
technically, that would be like the real Sengoku Jidai.
Yeah, what if the
clans did die?
What if the dragon just came down off their mountain and conquered like the Otaku family or something? Like just raised their lands, like subjugated them, married like their nobles into their house, and just made them part of the dragon. Like that would be cool stuff.
That would be very interesting to see. It would be very.
You guys would have been okay if they would just been like the Crane are gone now.
Honestly, yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
If it meant them not being stagnated anymore, if we could see something a little bit special or unique to it,
it would have been interesting and different.
Yeah.
Instead of it being just like, and sometimes that happened with some of the families, like in the history and
Yasuki,
and like the minor clans bonding together to basically join the Manus, but it was never through like conquest. It was always some like political necessity. And it was usually a minor clan. It was never like a great clan family other than the Yasuki. If I remember correctly.
Don't get me wrong. I would absolutely be sad if like the Crane clan was gone. Mostly from the Iaijutsu stuff and whatnot.
You could tell a cool story. Maybe there's like the lost Crane heir that wants to reform the clan.
Yeah.
And like maybe they have to like find allies amongst their former family or find new families or start their like there's cool story stuff you could do.
There's definitely a beats and storyline bits.
And you could reboot families that way. It'd be like, well, now I don't have to worry about the Asahina. They all joined the Phoenix, maybe. Like, we're not going to get them back, so now we need a new Shugenja family. What kind of, like, mechanical styles, even, like, what will the new Shugenja family be about? How will that translate to the card game and how they play? Like, there's lots of cool stuff they could have done.
Yeah, there's definitely, different things they could take in.
Again, you can only do that sort of thing so many times before that starts getting repetitive too, though.
Oh, of course,
it's a hard line to when a game goes on for 20 years, right?
Yeah, of course. There's just a point where sometimes, and this is definitely a topic for another day, but sometimes you have to end the story. You have to move on. And you have to just say goodbye.
Yep, all things must come to an end. Nothing gold can stay, Pony Boy. And there's my literary quote of the day.